The schools may be gone, but the legends live forever. Welcome to the final Jumpshot podcast. Here's your host, Marcus Carlton.
Well, joining me now on the final Jumpshot podcast is one of the names that when I started putting this idea together, this name kept coming up over and over and over about, you've got to get this guy. You got to get this guy. And I've finally been able to do it. So at this time, I want to welcome in to the final Jumpshot, Clover Bend legend, Scotty Pierce. Scotty, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for having me on your broadcast or podcast tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Clover Bend basketball. I can't believe it's been 45 years since I played at Clover Bend, but time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, sir. And for me, it seems like it's getting faster by the day. So I can relate.
Yes, sir.
So yes. Clover Bend is a pretty small community. Can you kind of set the table for us for anybody maybe that has never heard of Clover Bend and kind of give us a little background on that community?
Well, Clover Bend is a small community like other communities that you've been highlighting on your podcast. A very close-knit farming community. Back in 78 and 80, when I went to Clover Bend, it had one store. It had 4 churches across the street from the school and a few houses around the school. It was, primarily, like I said, a farming community, very rural, and agriculture was a big commodity in that community. The community was very supportive of the school and all the activities. When I transferred in, the people are very nice and very inviting. And every, Tuesday, Friday night, whatever we played, the gym was packed. The people came to visit before the gym, before the games. That was kind of the central hub. And but when the game started, the visiting was over until a halftime or until a timeout or halftime. So, very, very nice community.
And for those that aren't aware where it is, Lawrence County is the county it's in, correct?
Well, it's in Lawrence County. It's southwest of Hoxie.
Okay. All right.
Okay. If you go to Minern and make a right, and it's about 4 or 5 miles out to Clover Bend.
So as you're describing it, I hear a lot of similarities in the community that I grew up in, and it's kind of been a common theme with a lot of these other towns that it very small community, very tight knit, rural, agriculture based area, and that's been the running theme so far. So Clover Bend fits right in with a lot of the other towns that we've been spotlighting here.
Yes, sir, it does.
So tell me a little bit about what are some of your first memories of playing basketball?
Well, my very first memories of playing ball was in the front yard with a pole and a goal on grass. The grass got wore out pretty quickly because I spent a lot of hours out there playing. I got to also say that I had a neighbor that had a farm shop that had a concrete floor in it. And whenever conditions weren't good to be outside, he'd let me go in the shop and play. And he let a bunch of us kids around the neighborhood go in there and play. And heck, we could play in that shop, 365 days a year. And, I spent the majority of the time playing against older boys in the neighborhood. And which you can imagine, I got roughed up a bunch. And, but, that helped me later on. That kind of helped me in high school to know what I was going up against. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
The first organized team that I played on was in the 5th grade. I think that was 72, 73 school year at Hoxie. You know, I can remember going to Egypt and Cache, Walnut Ridge, and different places to play. You don't hear much about Egypt or Cache anymore, but I played the 5th grade through the 10th grade, you know, through 10 and a half years at Hoxie. And then I transferred from Hoxie to Clover Bend halfway through my sophomore year in 77, 78.
So once you get to Clover Bend and you see the way the community is and you get going with the basketball, who would you say was Clover Bend's biggest rival?
Well, because of the close, you know, proximity of other schools to the district, I think we had more than one rival. I think Black Rock was a rival, Lynn and Strawberry. But I think the biggest rival was Biggers Reno.
Okay. That, you know, I had talked with, you know, obviously on the earlier episode, some of my family that graduated from Biggers Reno, and I asked them, I was like, you know, was there kind of a rivalry with Clover Bend? Because, you know, it seemed like every conversation we had, it always come back to one game or another against Clover Bend, and the whole thing with Hoss Jones coaching there, and you know, it was just like the circle kept coming around to that same area. And when I asked the question, you know, they kind of paused and was like, well, yeah, I guess so, you know, because Biggers Reno was always thought of Maynard as one of their main rivals. But when I sit down and you know, asked the question, they kind of started talking about it. I was like, yeah, we had a lot of really good games, and, you know, it was a lot of good back and forth. So he said, yeah, I guess Clover Bend would have to be a rival.
Yeah, well, they were. And, you know, like I say, Black Rock was a big rival too, just because we was real close to Black Rock, and you had Coach Bryant and Coach Jones, and they liked to, you know, butt heads with each other. And, but, you know, every time when we played the Buffaloes, it was going to be a defensive battle. You know, and the teams respected each other, and we knew that each time that we played, it was going to be a dogfight. And we had a lot of close games, and, you know, one of the best players that I played against was Ralph Morrow. And but we had a lot of respect for each other and had some close games. And, you know, I would say that Biggers is probably the biggest rivalry that we had. So
we talked a little bit about that, and I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here because I didn't have this question on the list, and that's my fault. But who were some of your teammates that you played with from the time you got to Clover Bend and until you graduated?
Well, there's going to be a lot of some of my teammates is Terry and Scott Holly, Clayton and Kevin Roberts. We had a bunch of Burnsides. There was a lot of Burnsides in Clover Bend. I played with Harold and Gary and Paul. Scott Fowler. Played with Daryl Chrysler and Jeff Chrysler. Also played with Kevin and Alan Sims. Junior Blanchard and Alan Whaley. And another guy that moved in, David Looney. And Tim Satterfield and Tim and Steve Dole. And a lot of these names had lived all their life in Clover Bend and could tell you a lot more about Clover Bend than probably what Scotty Pierce could. But they were great teammates and good role players, and you know, we all gelled together well.
Okay, so you mentioned Biggers Reno was the big rival. You know, everybody knows I'm a Biggers Reno guy. I'm probably going to regret asking this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there any specific games that Clover Bend won, not just over Biggers Reno, but, you can include that too. Any specific wins that still stick with you all these years later?
Well, and if I mess up and say something wrong, I'm sure I'll hear about it. But anyway, my junior year, I think it was, we played Swifton, and we went to Swifton early in the year, and I just set this up. We went to Swifton earlier in the year, and they beat us pretty good. And they had some good players. They had Jabbo Floyd. I figure you've heard that name.
Yes, sir.
Sonny Campbell. And they had another player that I could not think of his name. And, they beat us. They beat us real good. And anyway, we get back home, and, back then everybody rode the bus back home. And we start getting off the bus. Coach Jones told us to go in and get our uniforms on. We was going to have practice. So we played full game, and then we come home and did a full practice. I think that Coach Jones was giving us an attitude adjustment at that time. Not only preparing us for the next game, but preparing us also if we played them again. And we did play them again. I can't remember what was going on, but I think it was a triple overtime win. And so anyway, that's a game that sticks out. And then one night we had Wiener coming to Clover Bend. And I think they were either ranked third or sixth in the state. And all week, I heard people telling us that they're just going to mop you all over the floor. That's what they were saying. And anyway, they came to our gym, and our gym was a small gym. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. I'm sure you are. We had a restraining line.
Yes, sir.
And there was a lot of schools that came into Clover Bend gym, and they had trouble adjusting to the smaller gym setting. And that night, we sent the Cardinals home defeated. And then another game that comes to mind, and I mean, there's a bunch of games with Biggers, and I can't tell you whether we won or we lost, But another game that comes to mind, we was in the Lawrence County tournament, and there's a lot of good schools in Lawrence County, and had great basketball teams. And this was my senior year, I think it was, and Hoxie had some boys that transferred in, and they were a bigger school, and we'd won the county tournament my junior year. So we kind of had a chip on our shoulder that we wanted to win that thing the second time. Anyway, we hooked up with Hoxie, and we wound up beating them. So that's three games that come to mind that really stick out in my mind.
All right, so let's flip the coin on this. And I remember specifically when I was talking with Ralph and some of the other guys, they all said that the losses stick with them more so than the wins. Are there any hard losses that still come to your mind?
Well, first up for a hard loss would be Biggers Reno in the finals of the district tournament, and it was my senior year. And I don't know where we played it at, but anyway, they beat us, and then we had to go to the regional tournament at that time. I don't know when the region started. I think it started my senior year. I could be wrong on that. But then we played Tyronza in the regional, and that game sticks out because they beat us, and that was the last game of my career. So that one always sticks out in your mind.
Sure.
And then another one that sticks out, first round of the state tournament, my junior year, we lost to Parkdale, but there was a lot of people that lost to Parkdale that year and the year after that. But I think that year they went on to win it all, and they may have won the overall also.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I interviewed Ronald Claiborne from that team.
Okay.
I did an episode with him, and he talked a lot about that run through the state tournament and through the overall, and then I believe that would have been his junior year, and then his senior year they won state, and then lost to that legendary West Memphis team with Keith Lee and Michael Cage and all that bunch in the overalls.
But a little story about that Parkdale game. I think they beat us 20. I don't recall. But after that game was over, that was my junior year. Coach Jones scheduled them for my senior year at Parkdale.
Oh, wow.
And we traveled to Parkdale and go down and play them on their court. And they wind up beating us 5 the next year at their place. So we had a heck of a game with them down there. And but that's just how Coach Jones was. He'd schedule us. Whoever'd play us, we'd go play them. And if we had to go play them on their court, that was fine. And but he was getting us prepared for the tournaments.
So talk to me a little bit more about playing for Coach Jones, or as most people know him as Hoss. What was it like to play for him? Where did I start? It was one of the greatest opportunities of my life. He's definitely a legend in the coaching circles, not only in Arkansas, but also in Missouri. He coached a lot in Missouri. And, my opinion, he was a great coach. He instilled in us this was one of his mottos. We are going to do things right on and off the court. And, Coach Jones, he was all about structure. He was all about discipline. Coach Jones, he was hard on us. Practices, they were very intense, and they were very detail-oriented. He worked to instill not only a mental toughness, but a physical toughness. And if you ever got to watch us play, if there was any loose balls on the court, he was expecting you to go after it. He was wanting you to dive on the floor and get the ball. And he was a fierce competitor, and he wanted to win. Yeah, that's that. I've heard the stories about he and then, like you mentioned, Coach Bryant earlier at Blackrock. Some of these coaches that one of the reasons I wanted to do this is to make sure that the legacies that guys like Hoss Jones and Herschel Bryant and Jerry Morrow and some of these guys, with the schools being gone, and you're getting, there's fewer and fewer of us that remember those names. And, one of the things I wanted to do is make sure that try to keep those legacies alive.
Well, and also you had Coach Glenn over at Lynn.
Yes, sir.
He was there forever, and he was a good coach also. Had a lot of good teams over at Lynn. Marcus, looking back, as I gotten older, and, I look at it as Coach was not only preparing us for basketball, but he was preparing us for life, and he always taught us to be respectful. He commanded yes sir and no sir, and he wanted you to be a team player. There wasn't no individuals. Today you see kids out here questioning the referees calling and getting technical fouls. You wasn't going to do that on Coach Jones's team.
Yeah, I was about to ask what would have happened if maybe you'd have gotten a bad call and you'd have turned around and kind of raised your hands at the referee in front of Coach Jones.
I wouldn't have been on the court very long, and I've been on the bench for a longer period of time. But Coach, he wanted us to be coachable. He demanded that work ethic. I mean, he worked us hard, but that's okay. And he always taught us about acting right, because we were not only representing ourselves, but we was representing the school and the community. And he even got involved in our appearance. There was quite a few of us had to get haircuts at points in time. So, but the one thing about Coach, when you played for Coach Jones, you became part of his family. And he personally helped me get my first 2 coaching jobs after I got out of college. And he was a great friend, great mentor, and just an excellent coach.
So you touched on that. Let's talk about life after your eligibility's up and you graduate from Clover Bend. You mentioned that Coach Jones helped you get into the coaching business. Elaborate on that a little bit for me.
Well, life after high school, I was able to get a 4-year scholarship to the College of the Ozarks in Clarksville, Arkansas. And I played all 4 years, and our senior year, we won the AIC district champs, or we were the AIC district champs in 1984. We had a record of 27-6, and we got ranked in the nation number 14 at one time. But and during that time, and I'll get back to the other own coach, during that time, I got to play against some outstanding players. Played against Chris Mullen.
Oh, wow.
Ed Pickney, Ricky Norton, Doyle Moncrief, which I think is Sydney's cousin. And also played against a guy named Lawson Pilgrim that played at Hendricks. And, but anyway, that was during my college career, and basketball. My first year at College of the Ozarks, we got to go to Honolulu, Hawaii. We spent 9 days over there and played seven games in 9 days.
Wow.
And, basketball has taken me from, I've been to Honolulu, Hawaii, and I've been all the way to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So, and I was fortunate, I could play a little bit and got a chance to go on to the next level. And it's been a great ride for sure.
So I got to ask you about that Hawaii trip. Coming as a young man from rural Lawrence County, Arkansas, what was it like when you stepped off the plane in Hawaii? And I assume they had the little hula girls coming up and putting the leis around your neck and that kind of thing. What was that like?
Oh, it was unbelievable, Marcus. I mean, I hadn't been that far from Clover Bend for sure. But anyway, they did, and Honolulu it's unbelievable. The culture and the environment over there is so much different than ours. In fact, I was walking into the airport, and I was walking through there, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, Pierce." And it was a guy from Hoxie that we had played on the junior high football team together, and he was in the service over there.
Oh, wow.
So, how can, that's just unbelievable that you would meet somebody that far away from home. And, but, like I said, we played Chaminade University. We played the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And we went to the Big Island. And it was just an unforgettable trip.
Yeah, I would imagine so. That's pretty awesome.
But, basketball's been good to me. And I can thank Clover Bend for allowing me these opportunities and experiences because, that's how I got to the second level.
So once you're done there with the College of the Ozarks, you decide you're going to go into coaching. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I got my degree in 4 years, got out, and of course I was looking, had to get references and get a resume put together and call Coach Jones and he said, I may have a position up here in Houston, Missouri for you. And so anyway, go up there and interview, and I got the position. Then Coach Jones leaves that year, and after that year, he's going to go to West Plains. So I get on his shirt tail and go with him and go to West Plains. He had a position open for me down there. And so I got to coach, 2 years with him. And after that, the second year, I went back to be a grad assist at Arkansas State under Jerry Ann Winters. And anyway, we had a good run over there. And I stayed there for a year, and the Hoxie position came open, and Hoxie head boys job position come open. I applied for it and got it. And then I coached until 1992 at Hoxie. That was from 87 to 92. And then I went to the classroom for a few years, and then went back and became the girls basketball coach at Sloan Hendricks. So coached there a few years, couple years, had a great run with Sloan Hendricks, and then I worked my way up and went to administration. I spent 38 years in education.
And all of it started because of basketball.
And all of it started because of basketball. It was, like I said, just having look, God gives us all talents. And I guess my talent was playing a little bit of basketball. And I was fortunate enough to take those talents and turn it into a career, either coaching or being a school administrator.
That's quite the journey there, Scotty. It has certainly been a pleasure to listen to you tell this story and talk about your journey from all the way from that small gym at Clover Bend to Honolulu to back to Hoxie and then up to Sloan Hendricks. I mean, that's quite the journey, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. And after I left Sloan Hendricks, I come to Boonville in 1998, and I've been here ever since. There was 1 year that I went back to Hoxie and was principal there. And then I decided to come back to Boonville, and I've been here, and I retired in 2022 from Boonville. And so I've been taking it easy for, 3 years now.
Well, I'd say you probably deserve it.
Well, I hope I've shed a little bit of light tonight on my career and Coach Jones and I just, I want to say, Marcus, to you, a special thanks for providing a platform for our stories to be heard, and also keeping the spirit and the legacy of Clover Bend, alive.
Yes, sir.
I think you're doing a great job keeping the small school memories alive. And I just want to thank you for your dedication to this task.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and it's kind of like I told you before we started recording. This is a labor of love for me, and I want my kids to be able to hear some of these stories and hear a little bit about how I was able to grow up and some of the people before me, and it's just it has been so neat for me to hear the stories from, guys like you at Clover Bend. And I've talked to guys from Lynn and from Turl and Leachville and just, kind of all over Northeast Arkansas with these small schools that are no longer around. And the stories are all very similar. It was just, the school was the heartbeat of the community.
Definitely. I mean, like I said earlier, the school was the hub of that community. And to go back and talk, I was real sad when found out that Clover Bend was going to be, consolidating with Hoxie. I felt sad for, the students and the staff and the community, even the alumni,
Yeah.
I probably felt more sad for the community because, as well as I do, once you lose the school, you lose the community. That usually follows.
Yes, sir.
I've listened to other podcasts and I've heard the stories of, how communities have gone down and how the buildings are in disrepair. But Clover Bend is different. I don't know if you know this, but, individuals pulled together and got that school on the National Register.
Yes, sir.
And, when you drive by the school today, I mean, I was down there a few years ago and drove out there. It looks just like when I was attending school out there. And they hold a reunion each year at the school around Memorial Day. Those people, they took a negative and turned it into a positive to keep the legacy of Clover Bend alive. And I would just like to personally thank all the individuals involved who, worked so hard to save that school, to save the school buildings. And they're beautiful on the outside, and they're beautiful on the inside. You can still go in and you can still see our plaques on the wall, or our boards on the wall, I should say. And so it's so neat that they're trying to keep that going, and it's on the National Register, so it'll be there forever.
Yeah. And that, I have to admit, I'm a little bit jealous of that, because we were not fortunate enough to be able to do something like that at Biggers. But, I think it's just wonderful that community of Clover Bend came together like it did and was able to preserve, the heartbeat of their history, basically.
Right. And I went by and I took some pictures of it, and people ask me, where I went to school at. And, hey, I pull the pictures out and show it to them. Yeah. Show them the gym. Right there is where I played ball. It's just so neat to be able to, that they preserve those buildings.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I knew that, but I had forgotten it until you brought it back up. So that's wonderful. And it's definitely worth the drive out to take a look at it and see it.
Yes, definitely is.
Well, Scotty, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I learned a little bit about Clover Bend, and well,
you're welcome, Marcus, and thanks again for inviting me to be on your podcast. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Final Jump Shot, a Cam Productions podcast. Subscribe to The Final Jump Shot to ensure you never miss an episode.